Hi everyone and welcome to the sew-along for the cardigan. This pattern is in a knit fabric, so I've pattern made it with 6mm 1/4 inch seam allowances. So when you're ready, set your overlocker up with 4 threads of colour that match your fabric and set the stitch width to 6mm. When we overlock this garment together, we're going to overlock on the raw edge of our fabric, so you won't need to cut anything off with your blade. When you use your plain sewing machine, make sure you have a ball needle in it and lengthen the stitch length from normal. Don't forget to test stitch on spare fabric before you start. So you're going to need to have a way of finishing the hems on this garment. I'm going to use a ball needle with stretch thread in my commercial sewing machine. You could also use a twin needle in a domestic sewing machine. You could use one of the various hemming stitches in your domestic sewing machine, or you could use a cover stitch machine. So don't forget to test stitch on spare fabric to make sure all your tensions are right before you begin, and we'll get started. So we're going to start by sewing the neckband into the garment. So this is just the back neckband. If we open it up, there's double notches that show us the centre back position, and if we have a look at our back pattern pieces, we have notches here as well. So we're going to need to slightly stretch this to fit. So when you're ready, place the back right side up and fold this neckband piece so that is wrong sides together or right sides out, like so. So making sure we have right sides together, we're going to overlock this here, just very gently stretching the centre to make sure that those double notches will match. The next step is to sew in our sleeves, and you have 2 sleeves that are identical. So what we're going to do now is, here is the top of my garment, and if you have a look on the side, you'll see the armhole area, and you'll see a notch in the centre. So the centre notch here is going to sew to the centre notch on our sleeve, like so. Open your sleeve piece out and place it right sides together to the armhole area. And then overlock that into place. Actually, I should mention, now when we overlock a seam like this, you'll see that this end points out slightly in a triangle. That's because the very outside of the stitching needs to meet exactly on the seam allowance line, in this case 1/4 inch, 6mm. So by placing the sleeve like this, I'm going to make sure when I overlock, the outside edge of the overlocking hits precisely in the right point. Okay, so go ahead and repeat that for the other sleeve. Okay, so put that away somewhere safe, and we're now going to work on the front drape piece. Okay, so this is our front drape piece, and we have cut out a pair, which some people call a mirror. So we have one this way and one this way. When we sew this, we need to make sure that we sew it right sides out because we do need to maintain that pair. So what does that mean in simple terms? Don't get the right side mixed up from the wrong sides. So to help us do this, what I'm going to do is on one of these, I'm going to place a pin with the top of the pin on the right side, so I know my right side from my wrong side. You could put chalk marks, you could do whatever you like. I'm just going to make sure, because I know mine are inside together, I'm going to just do this. Just so I don't get mixed up. Okay, so my pin head represents the right side of my fabric. Okay, so what we need to do now is create the hem and the mitre at the same time. Now, if you have a cover stitcher, this is a lot easier, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a line of overlocking down this edge, which is going to be the centre front edge, and along the bottom, which is my hem edge. I'm not going to worry about this mitre at the moment, simply because I'm going to sew that together later. And I'm going to make sure I run my overlocking on the right side. So all I'm going to do is come here, and you can see this is the hem turn position because I've popped a notch in it there. And then I'm going to continue overlocking down here. And now what I'm going to do is create my mitre, and I know this is the right side, so I'm going to fold this right sides together with that notch right at the fold. And I'm going to overlock together those two short edges. Like that. So what's going to happen is, when we get to the stage we're going to sew those hems into place, my corner will sit nicely like this. So when you've done this one, go ahead and repeat this for the other side. So here is the right side. So now we're going to go to our iron and press our hem allowance in on those two seams that we've just overlocked. So what you'll find is there's a notch to show you the press position for this hem here. This hem is 2 centimetres. 2 centimetres is 3/4 of an inch, so we're going to be pressing that down towards here and then across the bottom. Now if you find your fabric stretched and like mine you can't quite get a perfect corner in it, it's okay to re-overlock this or just stitch it again. So all I'm going to do there is just take a little bit out, starting on the raw edge here, and just come up a teeny bit. I suspect maybe when I was cutting this out I wasn't cutting it quite accurately enough. It'll just make life a little bit easier when you go to iron. Let's see if that's the trick. Yes, when I iron that, that'll make it just a nice hem finish at the corner by the time I push that out properly. So now we're going to sew the side fronts to the back. So find the back neck like this. And what we're looking for is the side here with the notch in it. So making sure we have right sides together, and we want the seam we've just pressed closest to the centre. So we want to make sure the notch here matches, and as we come across to the centre front, this is what we're looking for. Now when we overlock this, I'll show you when we do it, but what we're going to do is place the notch here. The notch here is right on that seam you just pressed, on the folded edge of that back neckband, and we'll be wrapping it over through to the back to hide all those raw edges. So what I'll do, actually I'll sew that seam now so you can see it. So this is the view from the back. So I have right sides together. Here's that seam now. Obviously I've cut that notch a little bit deep. So we want to put the fold here on that notch and wrap that over like so. And I'll just start overlocking there, and I'll make sure that I deal to that notch that was cut too deep. So when you cut notches, we literally only want a really small nick. It's 1/8 of an inch, 3 mil, perpendicular to the fabric edge. Okay, so there we've got that there. We're going to continue overlocking, making sure we match that notch. So what's happened here is when we turn that through like so, we've got this lovely transition from the back to the front, and we'll be stitching that hem down shortly. So when you've done one shoulder there, we're going to come around and do the other. So place this right side up, place the side right side down and find the edge with the notch. And so the edge with the mitre in it is closest to the neckband side. We want those two notches there to match. So we want that notch there to be on the fold, and then we're going to wrap it around to the back and overlock that seam. Right, so now we're going to move on to sewing the underarm, which is the sleeve seam as well. So find one of your sleeves and fold it so that we have right sides together, and match the wrists. And the wrist is the shorter end. And overlock up that seam. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first, because I don't have, I'm not using my cover stitcher at the moment. I'm just going to overlock that hem edge just to make it easier for myself. Right, so now let's sew that underarm seam edge. And you can see the notch here, that shows us the hem position for the sleeves. Question the other day from a very nice lady who asked, which way should the seam sit when we come to the underarm? Well, the seam should actually push towards the needle. The reason for that is because when we press our garments, all our seam direction should either face to the hem of the garment or towards the sleeves, in this case down. Now, habit, as we sew towards the underarm, because most people do start at the wrist, you just sort of go with the flow and it pushes the seam up. That's actually wrong. Those two seams should be really facing the wrist area. It should, most people don't. In fast fashion you'll find it doesn't get done, simply because it's cheap and easy to just go with the flow. And sometimes it's easier to have these facing in different directions just to lock the seam together, but if you want to know the correct way of doing it, both of those seams should face towards the wrist. Alright, so now we're coming down the side seam, and you'll find the seam here will match to a notch here. So just make sure that is on top of each other. And I've just realised that I should have overlocked. I've got the construction sequence wrong, but I don't know if I'm going to bother to redo the whole video. This hem here hasn't been overlocked. That's the back edge of the hem. It won't matter if you're using a twin needle, but if you're doing like I am with the overlocking and the plain stitching, now's the time to overlock the lower edge of the back. So I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to be really slack and not re-record this entire video. So I'll make sure that's changed in the written construction sequence, but what I've done is overlock secure the hem edge of the back piece. As I said, if you're using a twin needle or a cover stitcher, you won't need to worry about that. Alright, so jumping back into what we were doing before, now's the time to sew the other sleeve together. So all that's left to do now is hemming. So this is hemming the garment hem and hemming the sleeve hem. What I'm going to do now is press all the hems that remain. So we're going to press the back hem by 2 centimeters, which is 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm coming to the sleeve hems and I'm going to press them 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch. And there's a notch to show you the turn position. And then we'll go ahead and sew those hems in. So if you have access to a cover stitch at 2 centimeters. If you're using a twin needle at 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch. So let's sew the sleeve into place. And the fabric I'm sewing with today is a heavy weight. It's probably a 220 or a 240 weight winter t-shirting, so it's quite heavy, and it has around 70% stretch, so it's very stretchy. Now just bear in mind, if you're like me and sewing with your plain sewing machine, this seam is tending to snap if you put too much pressure on it, so using a twin needle or a cover stitch machine is better, or using a lightning bolt stitch or a zigzag on a domestic sewer. So what I'm doing is just sewing 2 rows of stitching just to mimic the look of a cover seamer. So go ahead and repeat that on the other sleeve. And you might also notice that when I'm sewing these, I'm tucking that overlocking tail in, so I don't have to worry about securing it by cutting it off or threading it through or whatever method you choose. The other thing I'm doing when I'm sewing this is I'm actually turning my garment inside out, so I can sew on the right side, and I'm starting and finishing on the underarm line. So the remaining hems we have to sew are the side front, so this is the back neck here, and the seam we're sewing, we're going to start sewing it on the line where it transitions to the back neck. So you sew it through the overlocking line exactly at that point there, which is 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to sew mine from the right side of the garment. It's up to you, you can sew it from the back if you want. We have pressed this into place, so it should be reasonably easy to do. Don't forget to back tack. And just take your time, because this is the side front of the garment, so it's the side that's going to be seen. So just take your time. I'm approaching the mitre here, and obviously you'll find this easier if you sew it from the back of the garment, the inside, but I'm just going to stop my needle down in my work like that. I'm going to lift, turn and pivot, and now I'm going to just rearrange everything and continue stitching my hem. Okay, so I'm approaching my other mitre now. I'm just going to make sure the ends of that overlocking tail is tucked in. I'm just going to rearrange everything so it's all nice and tidy and smooth. Now I'm approaching that other neck edge. I'm going to tuck that overlocking line in. I'm just going to make sure that I finish my stitching there. So that's it, you're finished. If you'd like to put a second line of stitching in, go ahead. Don't forget to give your garment a really good press, and hey, thanks for joining me, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again soon.